Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of the year. I am very excited to talk about our topic, which will cover the major financial planning considerations during a transition or when you are changing jobs or potentially also negotiating for a new opportunity. My name is Beata Dragovic. I'm the founder of Freedom to Your Financial. We are an independent wealth management firm in Boston. We work with clients on a long-term basis, and we believe in a strong foundation of comprehensive financial planning that includes accumulation goals such as retirement planning, education planning, and investment and tax planning, and working extensively with professionals in the biopharma and technology fields have allowed us to consult on equity compensation strategies with our clients, including and mainly during time of transition, which will be today's topic. What we will focus on today, first we will touch base on compensation trends briefly. We will spend most of our time on how to approach a transition that is a very good experience and at the same time also beneficial from a financial planning standpoint, really trying to take the stress out of the experience. Even though there are a lot of folks listening in from the life science sector, I would like to point out that the presentation is useful for a much wider audience. And I also would like to add that this is a generic presentation. And you might find that various roles, such as negotiating a C-level position, will require different and/or further considerations. I also welcome questions. We did leave time at the very end of the presentation to answer them all, so please make a note. And we will also be able to send you the recording after our webinar, after our session is over. So what is it that drives trends in the life science industry that will affect jobs and compensation? The life science industry continuously experiencing constant growth due to ongoing discoveries and mergers and acquisition. It is a very exciting time to work in the field as new jobs are being created continuously, and there is a very strong job security. Obviously with Boston being the world's top biotech hub, the opportunities are also endless. So the demand for talent and competition for key employees, let them be directors, executives, or C-level folks, continuously increasing. And employers have to offer very competitive compensation packages to attract and keep talent. Due to the high-risk nature of the industry and the global markets, there is obviously a very distinctive shift in the mix of equity compensation that what we've been seeing, and mainly a shift away from options towards regular stock awards. These trends particularly evident in my mind within small and mid-cap companies. These are the organizations that historically were really leveraging stock options as their primary equity driver. And obviously, as everyone would like to get paid, and stock is a much more effective and much more sure compensation, we see a trend towards that. Executives are unwilling, obviously, to put their large percentage of their compensation into more unreliable options, and that goes across the organization. I also want to mention that we've seen a very strong effect from tech companies entering the life science field. And I would want to say one example here, but how I've seen that in compensation trends is employee stock purchase plans. In the last many years, this became very, very popular in becoming more popular, I should say, within life science firms, which I haven't seen as much, but with technology companies, this has been very popular for the last 5 to 10 years. So we see the trends there. One other trend that strongly have been changing in the last few years is performance shares. These are becoming more popular. More and more companies use performance shares as part of their equity compensation package. These grants are usually not granted up front when you negotiate, but rather part of a long-term incentive plan. And this kind of stock compensation, as many of you probably know, is tied to an event in the future, such as meeting a target goal or overall performance of the company. There are there's actually a great variety of how PS performance shares are structured, and it will all depend on your company. So that's hard to discuss in advance. And where I find them to be very beneficial than regular restricted stock many times, because they can offer higher than 100% target pay in case of overachievement. So that's definitely a positive. So what are the major considerations when you are looking for a new employment? What I've seen and heard from experience that many times it doesn't start with a financial goal in mind, but potentially different kind of career factors. But what I would suggest is that you need to consider various factors here. Companies, from a human resources department point of view, they don't just want to attract you, but they want to retain employees as well. So the compensation package that they will offer you will obviously match that. And with that said, we are not just talking about base salary and bonus, but we are talking about here severance benefit. Again, we are in a sector that has a very strong M&A, merger and acquisition activity. So negotiating in advance your severance package can be very important, as well as ongoing long-term incentive plans, performance incentives. So you should take into consideration all of this, and we will talk about it obviously in more detail. So where do you start? My recommendation at all times is to start, especially if you have the time, to think through your transition. I definitely recommend that you start with your current benefits. You need to understand both your vested and unvested benefits with your current company, because most importantly, this will be the basis for you to negotiate a new offer. And you also want to make sure that financially your new offer matches or it should be better than where you are currently. Unless you are already at a financial independent. I do have to mention this as well. You might be already financially independent in the second part of your career, and you're really looking for adventure. And in that case, more of a challenge. And in that case, you might take a job. We've seen this many times in a smaller biotech firm. And obviously, you might not have a compensation that you would have at a larger pharma company. So with that said, let's go back to this. What are your vested benefits you want to take? I just want to list here. You obviously want to understand your current 401k plan and matching contributions in the 401k plans are very generous in this sector. You want to understand your vested options that you have. You might not have exercised them yet, so obviously there's going to be tax consequences there. You need to understand all of your documents. If by any chance, you need to understand how long you have time to exercise options once you leave the company. You need to understand the legalities all around. And you should look at all other incentives that your current employer offers. Also, most importantly, you also need to look at your unvested benefits that you are leaving behind. Let that be long-term incentive plan as well as unvested RSUs. This will be, again, a very important base for negotiating your new equity compensation with your company. The two most common long-term incentive plans that you want to think about are stock options and restricted stock. With that said, there are considerations in this case as well, what you need to look at as it comes to stock options. You want to assess the in-the-money stock option value. And why this is important, because many times I see people not considering taxes. You might not have as high a value in your stock options as you believe. You need to understand as well whether you have non-qualified or incentive stock options, because that also comes with different tax considerations. You also want to understand your vesting schedule and timing of that. Again, important when you are deciding to leave and potentially you are coming up with a large vesting event. You might want to wait a month or two and not leave large chunks of options behind that are not vested yet. And as I mentioned previously, you also want to understand the tax implications of your various options. As it comes to restricted stock, that's much more straightforward. You obviously, as soon as your RSUs vest, the stock is deposited into your account. And with unvested RSUs, you need to leave those units behind if you leave the company before they vest. But again, for purposes of negotiations, you want to understand the value of those. So more and more human resources comes up with very comprehensive initial package offerings, and they will most of the time show you more of a long-term approach to your new offer, and as well as your entire compensation package. And obviously they are doing this, they are absolutely aware of the fact, and they are ready for you to negotiate. But at the same time, they also would like you to understand that they are willing to put together a very comprehensive package to attract employees. And at the same time, this compensation package will also reflect that they would like to retain you in the long run. So you need to understand that as well. And you will most of the time see salary part of this, as well as a sign-on bonus and an annual target bonus. Obviously, there is a saying that you have, and it's actually even true, not just a saying, but at the very beginning of your employment, that's the best time to negotiate. So what you can negotiate in this case is your initial stock grants. It's very rare, pretty much unheard of, that you are able to negotiate a long-term incentive plan. But many times you are able to see that already reflected in your new offer. So you need to understand that as well as your 401k match. I do want to point out why this is important here. And this is where it comes in, that it is crucial for you to understand where you stand financially, what kind of financial goals, which stage of your financial life you stand at this point, what kind of immediate, short-term, intermediate, or long-term financial goals you have. Because I see this kind of negotiations go very differently at various stages of your life. So obviously, if you have an education goal that's coming up in the next few years, you might want to negotiate for a higher sign-on bonus. If that's not the factor, but you do really want to make sure that you get as much as equity as possible in the long run, then you definitely will worry about, and you would like to accumulate wealth and have equity in the company as much as possible, you obviously will negotiate more for the initial grant. But you definitely should have an overview of what you are leaving behind as it comes to this table, and what is it that you are negotiating for. A few other factors to look at here as well, as I've been experiencing. When you are leaving a company and you have stock options, and suddenly you have to exercise a lot of options, you will probably have a pretty high tax liability. So in this case, you can negotiate that your sign-on bonus happens next year not to further add to your tax liability. Or you can even negotiate a higher sign-on bonus that can help you with your current tax liability. So you need to understand where you stand, and there are various factors that you need to look at. You also need to understand what is negotiable. So depending on the role that you are applying for, you will in advance know what is negotiable. And depending on the role, obviously this will have to be approved by a committee or by the board. But you can negotiate, they will tell you can negotiate for base salary, sign-on bonus. Why this is important, and many times we don't think it is as important, especially if you care more about equity in the firm, but you need to understand that the salary will obviously affect your target bonus. If it will one way or another affect 401k match. So it can add up. You can definitely negotiate or ask whether you can negotiate the type and size of the grant. As we mentioned before, companies will offer either restricted stock units only. Some of them will only offer options, but we also see many times that you get a little bit of both. So depending your own tolerance for risk, and we'll talk about this in the next slides, you obviously can negotiate one or the other. And also potentially the vesting schedule for your new grants. You can ask for higher grants and ask for a longer vesting schedule with that. And that obviously shows your loyalty to the company and your seriousness and commitment as well. And as mentioned before, especially in an industry that has a very strong mergers and acquisition activity, you do in advance, it might make sense for you to negotiate your severance package or acceleration of exercising options. So in this case, I also always recommend that you meet with an attorney, obviously, and review all legal paperwork, let that be summary, stock option grants, your new employment offer, severance package, and so on. So as mentioned before, the two type of grants that you will most of the time see will be restricted stock and stock options. And you need to understand what kind of tolerance for risk that you have, first of all, in order for you to decide whether you will negotiate, if it's possible, whether you will negotiate for more stock versus stock options. And you also want to be, obviously, as it comes to stock options, the number one goal is that you also want to be bullish on the stock, right? So, and you have a very long-term horizon. Stock options have excellent leverage, but many times your options can be out of the money and be worthless for many years. So you need to understand who you are as it comes to tolerance for risk and as it comes to your financial goals. And that's what it comes to restricted stock, is that if you are definitely would like to get more of a sure benefit, I would say, doesn't matter what the stock price is, when an RSU vests, you will receive the stock. So many times I also see a combination of both, that people would like both of it, take advantage of leverage in the long run, and at the same time also receive stock. So I want to take a step back here and talk about what is that's important, because we can continuously talk about taxation and various tolerance for risk. But I always say that rather letting your equity compensation drive your financial circumstances, you definitely want to flip that around. And first, you want to define your life's goals, such as educating your children, achieving a desired lifestyle, or retiring within a particular time frame, and let those goals drive your stock option or restricted stock decisions. And that being said, you obviously want to make smart tax decisions, but taxes should never drive your, just only taxation should also not drive your decisions. And obviously, I advise that you always work with a professional and create a multi-year strategy. And at the same time, I also want you to understand that stock volatility can alter this plan. I've seen it in the past, and it's these past few years as well, that many folks earmark stock options, equity compensation for short-term intermediate goals. And again, the same as I just mentioned before, the stock options are out of the money or not as valuable as you expect it for a while. So those kind of decisions, when you're defining those life goals and when you are earmarking assets, you want to pay attention to that as well. So starting to summarize all of this, obviously you want to negotiate your new offer whenever it's possible, and you need to consider your own financial situation first and utmost. You can always use your current benefits and incentives as a base for negotiations. They will expect you to do that. You want to definitely, if you're leaving options behind, you want to consider the forfeit value of those current unvested options, especially if you are applying for jobs that allow you for fairly strong negotiations. That's definitely something that the company will take into considerations. And most importantly, you want to consider taxes. And you, of course, most importantly, want to work with an advisor, with an attorney, because all of your documents have to be reviewed. And you want to make informed decisions after understanding the new company that you are going to work for as much as possible. How you plan your transition. I've seen folks being surprised how fast you have to make decisions. So because of that, I definitely recommend developing an action plan in advance. Again, as I'm repeating, need to understand your vested and list your unvested grants, because they both have different roles in negotiations during transition. And most importantly, going a little bit further from just equity compensation, you want to look at protection planning as well. You want to look at what kind of current disability and life insurance benefits that you have just through your current employer. And you want to understand what you will receive in the future. And you will probably want to re-examine whether your coverage for both of those are enough. I would say that disability coverage in this sector is very generous, but if you only have life insurance policy through your current work and the new company doesn't, that's definitely a consideration. Also, you need to understand the pros and cons of leaving an old 401k with your current company. You lose, obviously, control over an old 401k. This is definitely a discussion for a different webinar, but you want to make sure I come across folks in their 40s having old 401. Is looking at them. No one is managing them for years. So that's definitely a consideration and some disclosure about that. So how does this all fit into your overall financial plan? I would strongly suggest that our personal values are the things that have intrinsic worth to us. These are the qualities that we do hold dear and allows us to strive and to live. And I would like to all of you to ask a question in this case, that how well does the way you save, the way you invest and spend your money actually reflect what you say that your personal values are? And you start that with obviously when looking at where your money is invested. So I'm not going to go in detail through this investment diversification, but you look at all of your various financial goals. After that, you look at all the different ways you can save, whether let that be more of a taxable bucket where you are saving, as you can see on the screen on your left, or your company offers Roth 401k options and you rather save after tax and you are saving tax-free dollars or later on tax-free dollars such as in a Roth plan. You also want to look at what amount you have in pre-tax savings such as a 401k and IRA. So you need to understand your current financial goals, and at the same time you need to understand as it comes to taxation, where are your various assets. And this will also help you plan for the future and help making decisions when you are transitioning in between companies. It can also give you a very good look whether can you allow to defer within your 401k on an after-tax basis and rather use a Roth account versus you would be using a pre-tax account and rather using 401k plan. So these are all decisions that you and your advisor that you need to make. And as one of the last piece here, I would like you to look at your life balance sheet with a little bit different view, and please ignore the dollar amounts here. But what's most important here is a new set of eyes, how you look at your assets and liabilities and equities, especially in the field that you work in. On average, your earning power is 20% higher than the average in the US. Your net employment capital, as well as obviously your current home and equity compensation, is probably the largest asset as long as you are working. And how you leverage that and how you make decisions, earmarking your cash flow, income, as well as this equity compensation will matter how fast you are going to achieve your goals, as well as being financially independent. Let that be educating your children, buying a vacation home or a first home. And you need to understand as you're looking at your liabilities and equities on the screen, you need to understand what you need to earmark for retirement, what you need to earmark for that college education. And you obviously want to prioritize those goals as well. Once you know that, and once you understand above and beyond what is discretionary wealth, I believe you will have a very easy way of understanding how to earmark equity compensation for the future and how to make decisions such as, are you going for a salary that offers that significantly increases with your new job, or you rather take a new job that has potentially not as lucrative of a salary, but a lot of long-term incentive as it comes to equities. With that said, as a final recap, I would like to suggest that you start always by clarifying your financial goals that are aligned with your personal values. I also would like to suggest that you assess your current financial wealth, understand the benefits both at your current and future company, and work with professionals who can help you navigate through, make all of these decisions. With that said, thank you so much for your patience today. Thank you for listening in. And I welcome any questions at this point.